All right, so basic theology. We're talking now about general revelation. Now, in the previous time I did this, I gave it a slightly different title, but I think it's better to use this title this time. So last time we considered the question, can we know God? Okay, so knowing God was the title, and the answer is yes, we can know God. Not comprehensively, but certainly as much as God has revealed of himself to us. And why do we say yes? All right, who remembers why that is so, that we can know God? He revealed himself, that's right. He's made himself known. All right, so today we have a new question. How does God make himself known? And in the notes, the top of your notes, you'll see this. There are two ways in which God makes himself known. So there's two terms, general revelation and special revelation. Sometimes this is called natural theology and revealed theology. Now, and especially when it comes to the general, you'll see natural. Sometimes you see natural revelation, so the terms are not always precise in theological writing. So in this lesson, we're going to be mostly discussing general revelation, since special revelation is covered when we get to the doctrine of inspiration. So we're going to be talking here this week and the next couple of weeks about general revelation. And general revelation provides evidences for the existence of God. Now it doesn't, when we're talking about general revelation, we're talking about how God reveals himself outside the Bible. Now this revelation isn't specific like the Bible is. That's why we use the term special revelation. When God speaks specifically, that's special revelation. But when he speaks generally, that's general revelation. Outside the Bible, not specific, general revelation. All right. So we're going to talk first of all about characteristics of general revelation. And the first one is its general scope. It reaches all people. By scope, we mean how far does it reach? It reaches everybody. Everybody receives general revelation. It's there for them to read, if you want to put it that way. Now we have a couple of Bible verses that testify to this. There's probably more, but these are the two that are in the notes. Okay, so Matthew 5:45. So that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven, for he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good. He sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So when God does these things in the world, he is showing himself. He is showing, we'll talk a little bit later about how these events show something about God. But everyone experiences this. So day after day, night after night, we have the cycle of the earth. This regular cycle happens all the time. This is God's order. It shows something about the intelligence that designed the universe. All right? And everyone sees it. Now that doesn't mean everyone interprets it properly, but everyone sees it. Does that make sense? Next verse. Acts 14:17 from one of Paul's sermons. And yet he did not leave himself without witness in that he did good, and gave you rains from heaven and fruitful seasons, satisfying your hearts with food and gladness. So again, Paul is testifying that he's speaking, I believe he's speaking to Greeks here, if I recall correctly. He is saying that you Greeks who do not have the scriptures have had a witness from God. And he talks about the regularity of the seasons. He talks about the fruitfulness of the fields. Talks about all of those things. They're a witness from God. All right, so any questions or comments on what I've just said in this section? Anybody? Tola?
Sir, can we say that this general revelation about knowing God is, maybe we know God through all that he created, though not through the Bible. Maybe you just see the sea,
Right.
the trees, and all the animals that God created, and we believe in our heart that there is a God that created this.
Right. So what she's saying is we're not getting this information from the Bible. We're seeing the things that God created and seeing his power, and so we get the idea there is a God who created, okay? And the people throughout the world have this idea. Now they don't have the correct idea as to who the God is, but they have the idea there is a God. All right, Gordon.
I'm trying to think of a verse and I can't, but not just the heavens declare the glory of God.
Yes, Psalm 19. We will come to that.
Yeah, no, but I follow a Facebook thing that every day there's a creature, an insect or an animal or a plant life that proves evolution wrong.
Right.
That it's so involved. And
Yes.
I can't think, try to kind of think
Okay,
of a
well.
verse for it, but I can't.
Okay. Well, there are things talking about the creation of a man. I think of the verse that talks about we are fearfully and wonderfully made.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Okay, so you look at the complexity of creation and even of the smallest creature, and it seems impossible to imagine that evolution is the answer. But we're just generally getting into general revelation. So let me.
Would that not be general revelation?
Yes, it is. Yes, that is general revelation. Yes, but it does not tell you anything about the person.
Right.
Okay, so that's the distinction we're going to make. Second characteristic. So general in geography, it encompasses the entire globe. So just one verse in this one. This is Psalm 19. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Where their voice is not heard is the King James adds the word where there. Okay. So what it's saying is everywhere. So people everywhere, and as I've mentioned, I mean, there's obviously, if you read any kind of sociology or anthropology type textbooks, and you will read about groups in the South Seas, you'll read about the beliefs of people in North America before the coming of the Western civilization, and you read about the creation concepts of the big major religions, so Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, but all of them, here's the point, is that all of them worldwide have a notion that some great spiritual power created the world. So that's general revelation. It is general in its geography all the way around the world. Does that make sense? We're not getting specific here. We're just talking generally what creation is telling us. Okay, Cal?
On that Psalm 19, who is they, and is this worldwide speech?
Well, he's talking about, for example, and he uses the illustration in the next verse. He's going to start talking about the sun. So that they are the created things. They reveal, or they speak, but without words.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so that's what he's talking about. Yeah.
I'm not good at poetry.
Yeah, it's just, well, and it is poetry. Yeah, Psalm 19 is poetry, so it is poetic speaking. But it's like there is, you look at a cause, we're going to get into this in a minute. You look at an effect, and you automatically think there's a cause. There's something behind that. So I have actually, some years ago, I was out on Whiffen Spit in Souk. How many of you know where that is, Whiffen Spit? Okay, so you can walk out in the water on both sides. It's quite a lovely walk. So down at the end, is there a lighthouse at the end, or there's some kind of thing at the end, and the little rocky beach. And one time we walked out there, and here there was, on the beach there were a bunch of stones on top of the other stones, all lined up in a line. Now, that spoke to me. You know what it said? It said, the crashing of the waves, the random chance, somehow, just amazingly, lined those stones right up. Is that what it says? Anybody think that's what it says? No, because what does those stones say?
Someone taught and made a pattern.
Someone, probably a kid, decided to line up the stones like that on the beach. right? Okay, there was somebody who did that. There's an effect, and behind that is a cause. That's what we're talking about with general revelation. We look at the things in the world, and there is a cause behind that. All right, we'll keep on going. I got to get through my category. I got to get through my notes. That's the most important thing, isn't it? Than all this discussion. All right. General methodology. So I'm not going to put up all of these verses. We'll come to some of these later. For example, it employs universal means like the heat of the sun. So we're going to talk about that one a little bit later. And human conscience. So in Romans 2, it talks about the conscience of the Gentiles teaching them to do what is right, even though they don't have the scriptures. Okay? Whereas the Jews had the scriptures, and they had no excuse. But even the Gentiles, he says, those who don't have the scriptures, they do know right and wrong, in a general sense. Okay, so general methodology, using universal means to speak to man. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's now go into, we're going to look at some big words here. We're going to survey the arguments for general revelation. Thomas Aquinas, so this is the Middle Ages, formulated the logic of several of these points. Now, and they've been modified and developed somewhat by others as well. While there is merit to these arguments, natural theology or general revelation has its limits, and some people reject it entirely. All right, so just want to give this as a caveat as we begin. So the witnesses to God from general revelation, first of all, and this we'll spend all our time on this particular point today, the cosmological argument. Okay, there's a big word for you. Or we could just simply say the witness through creation. So cosmology, that's the study of the cosmos, of the heavens, of the creation. And if you think of the cosmos, you could use that as a synonym for universe. The universe is the cosmos. Okay? And so arguing from those, there is an argument that is made from the cosmos. All right, so first point. Simple statement. The universe around us is an effect which connotes an adequate cause. Now I'm quoting Charles Ryrie there, and these notes are primarily derived from his chapter on this subject. All right, so the universe around us is an effect which connotes an adequate cause. So when we look at, like I told you about the stones on the beach, that told me there was somebody who did that. All right? Now, when we look at this universe and the order and beauty of the universe and the tremendous things in the universe, we believe that tells us there is a cause. Something caused that to happen. Right? Everybody with me so far? All right. So there are some presuppositions that we have when we make this simple statement. First of all, every effect has a cause. Okay, so everything that is a created thing has something that caused it. All right, you can't think of really anything in our world that's observable to your eyes that does not have some cause behind it. Okay?
Why would you call that a presupposition? Because isn't that a law? Like in
okay, so you could possibly think of somebody who thinks that there are no causes behind things that they see. They would be a little bit loony, but that's what but we're starting with that idea. Okay, so as a law, you could say it's a law.
Based on reality.
Yeah, it's based on reality.
Yeah, I can't remember what they call it when they call it the laws of gravity and the laws.
Right.
Yeah, that's
There's
one of the laws.
that. This is in a sense a law. That's right. Okay, so every effect has a cause. All right, the next one. The effect caused depends on the cause for its existence. Okay, so let's just take. I'll take an example here. Okay, so we're all sitting on very comfortable chairs. We used to have some very uncomfortable chairs. That was what we would treat you with here in the church. And a few years ago, the Lord allowed us to buy these chairs. All right, you look at these chairs. Okay, so there is a cause that made those chairs, right? They designed them. They put them together, they ship them to us, and you sit on them. All right? So behind those chairs, there is a cause. But even, so that cause is actually, it's a company called Bertolini down in California. So but there's a cause behind them and what they did. So you look at the fabric. I don't know what it's made out of, but it's made out of something. That had a cause. Look at the metal. That's mined out of ore from the ground. And that had a cause. And of course, you can go through all the component parts. So what we're saying is, every effect caused, like a chair, or like a rock, like some ore, like the plant that, or if I don't know if these might be synthetic fabrics, I don't know. Okay, but whatever they were, there is an ultimate cause behind all those things. And they depend on that cause for their existence. So if we were to say, okay, let's say there were no chair companies in the world. Okay, how would we get a chair to sit on in church? Okay, well, these chairs depend on that cause in order to exist. So if we didn't have a chair company, we'd have to make our own chairs. But then we would be the cause. But we would be depending on the creator who maybe we make wooden pews like they used to have. Those are very comfortable. I sat on those growing up. All right, so we make some wooden pews, but there's a cause behind that wood, right? Before the man gets to it and mills it and planes it and sands it down and lacquers it and whatever else they do to it and hammer it together, there's a cause behind that. You see what I'm saying? So the effect cause depends on the cause for its existence. If the cause was not there, it could not exist. All right, go ahead.
So an idea
Yeah.
can have a cause, basically our created brain or whatever.
Yes, yeah, and it depends on a brain to bring about that, even an idea. Yeah, Rob?
I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but recently I watched Danny Faulkner on a Zoom meeting. He's
Right.
a cosmologist, and so he's like an expert. He says, I can tell you everything about gravity. I can tell you Isaac Newton's formulas. I can tell you how it attracts each other, but I don't know why it does that.
Right.
In other words, you can't define that by science, so-called.
Right.
He says, I can tell you everything about it, except for how it came to be and how
Right.
it works.
Okay, so yes, but so natural theology, Rob is talking about an example from Danny Faulkner's lecturing, that he can tell you everything there is to know about gravity as far at this moment, okay? Maybe there's a little extra he doesn't know, but let's say he does, okay? Okay, but he says he can't tell you why it happens. Okay, now, when we say that there's a cause behind everything that has happened, and it speaks about a causer, that's what point 2 is saying. There's a causer out there, something caused it. That doesn't mean, even though we realize something had to cause that doesn't mean that we actually can figure it out. All I'm saying is this is the idea behind this argument. Okay, next one, I gotta hurry up. Nature cannot originate itself. Okay, so you look at the ore that made the metal of these chairs, or the metal in these chairs is mined from some kind of ore in the ground. In the ground there, you don't have the ground, nothing, and then all of a sudden, whatever it is, iron or whatever it is, just appear. Okay, it doesn't make itself. Something makes it. And I was reading about the American gold rush in California, and they were talking about how in the way that gold is deposited, it is found all over the place. But in what happens is in areas where gold is deposited, the water movement sort of takes it on a stream, and then in certain places it's blocked out because it's heavier, it sort of settles down, and so then you get an accumulation. I may be describing this not perfectly. You get an accumulation of gold, and then it sort of settles into the rock until it's blocked up that spot, and then the water goes some other way. Okay, so what I'm saying is that it doesn't just happen, it doesn't create itself out of existence. The gold flecks were in the ground somewhere else before. The water carried it there, and then the men found it and used it, you see. Yes, Gord.
Men can make diamonds. They can't make gold. Like
Right, but they can't make it out of nothing, though.
No, but like an element like gold,
Yeah,
if it could have evolved, today man could make it,
yeah,
and they can't.
that's right, yeah.
They can't evolve.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so, okay, so there's the basics to start this. Now, development of this idea. Okay, so here are the options of existence. I have a chart. This chart comes from Ryrie's book. So you see the causes. Okay, so on the other side, the effect is the world. So we look at the world, that's our thing caused. Okay, so what are the options for the causes? Okay, so nothing caused the world, option 1. Okay, some people believe that. Okay, then option 2, something eternal caused the world. Okay, so eternal matter, we talked about this a little bit last time, eternal chance or eternal God. Okay, those are really the only options for the creation of the world. Okay, nothing, eternal matter, eternal chance, or eternal God. So, something came from nothing, something came from something, which must be eternal, right? So, those are the ideas. The universe is eternal, or chance is an eternal principle, or God the eternal being. Does that make sense? Do you understand the breakdown there? Anybody have any questions about that? Marlene.
Is it either or is there an answer there?
There is an answer, but we're going to work through. But these are the possibilities, okay? These are the possibilities. These are the possible things that people have proposed, okay? Now, some of them are quite clearly wrong. All right, so the first option, something came from nothing, the impossibility of that. First of all, if this is true, the cosmos, the universe, is self-created. So we've often talked about, I've heard that they don't teach this anymore, or at least the scientists don't hold it anymore, but the Big Bang Theory, you've heard about that. But the Big Bang Theory itself depends on something existing before the bang. Okay? And so I've often asked people who have told me about that. I said, so what was there before the bang? And how did it get there? Well, we don't know. Okay? And so, so can you imagine that, okay, so supposedly, if the Big Bang was true, there is this substance, very densely packed, and exploded. And the dust of that explosion went all over, and some of it, as it cooled down, began to form the galaxies and the stars and the... You think about how much matter is in all of that. Now, I have no idea. I mean, you think about how big the world is, and when you compare that to the sun is huge. There's matter there. So that's a lot of matter to be in this thing that exploded. Well, how did that matter get there? Out of nothing? Okay. Well, so if this is true, the cosmos itself is self-created. If something came from nothing without any other cause. Secondly, for something to be self-created, it must exist and not exist at the same time in the same way. This is Ryrie's statement. Okay, does that one make sense to you? For it to be self-created, this is the illogic of this view. For it to be self-created, it has to exist and not exist at the same time in order to create itself. That's what he's saying. So, the logical contradiction is what he's saying about this. And then finally, self-creation, I just self-corrected myself. Self-creation has never been demonstrated or observed. Okay, nobody's ever seen it. in the laboratory, nothing spontaneous. You don't get substances spontaneously happening anywhere. You can't create an environment that would cause nothing to turn into something. So the reality is, the notion on that chart there where it says option 1, nothing, totally impossible. Totally impossible. All right, any comments or questions, Wolf?
I've heard it said, like the word universe is a compound word, meaning one
Yeah.
in the spoken language.
Yes.
Genesis 1:1, you have space, or time, space, and matter.
Yeah.
Right? So in the beginning, time, space, in the beginning was the word.
No, you're getting in the wrong chapter. You're getting John 1:1 now.
Right.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
So space, time, and matter.
Yes. All right, but, okay, so we're just talking about natural revelation. That special revelation tells us who did that, okay? Who specifically. But the general revelation tells us something did that, okay? So it's not nothing. So nothing created anything.
I have a little.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, you're talking about cause and effect.
Yes.
Everything has to come from a cause and then an effect.
Yes.
In this study, is there a place that shows that part of it was caused by God? Because if there's cause and effect, and the philosophers, the scientists are bringing arguments,
Yes.
I'm asking whether any of it said the cause was God.
Okay, well, at the end of this argument, we would conclude the cause is God. Right, okay? So what we're doing is just analyzing the arguments at this point. Okay, so the second one, the impossibility of the eternality of matter. So this is what Aristotle and Plato believed. Remember, we talked about that last time. There was this chaos of matter from which the universe was formed. And Aristotle really, I think, believed that it happened without any God involved. So here's the points. It violates various scientific laws. So the laws of thermodynamics, okay, which says matter can't be created or destroyed, and that matter, or that all the energy in the universe seems to be winding down. That's part of the laws of thermodynamics. So the fact that matter would be considered eternal, that goes against these laws that have been stated and held by scientists. All right, so it violates these laws. Various observations indicate that the universe is slowing down. So the degradation of the speed of light, for example. Now, I don't know how they measure this, but there's apparently evidence that the speed of light is slowing down. Right? Now, there's a lot of things that are said about the speed of light, which I do not understand. I'm just reporting to you what I have been told, okay, here. But the bottom line is that the universe, according to observation, and according to the laws of thermodynamics, is slowing down. So matter cannot be eternal if the universe is slowing down. And then finally, almost everyone agrees that the universe had a beginning at some point. Okay, so there's almost a universal testimony that there was a beginning. So that argues against the possibility of the eternality of matter. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm going to rush and move on because I've got a couple other things to say. The impossibility of the option of chance. Now, this is what evolution teaches, that it was all just random chance that created everything that we know. All right, number one. Incredible faith is required to believe this option. Okay? Now, some people have gone and said, well, God used chance to create. Yeah, but then you're putting God ahead of chance. So some people say there is no God and it's just chance. It's just random chance. Well, that is like, again, we could say, using the illustration of the line of rocks on the beach there, just random chance, the waves lapping against the shore, the tide rising and carrying, and somehow those rocks were placed in that line by random chance? That's not how randomness works, right? So the next point is, this is for Ryrie, it can be demonstrated mathematically that random chance could not have produced what we observe today in the universe. Randomness tends towards chaos. It doesn't tend towards order. Okay, Maureen wants to jump in.
Well, I just wanted to say, in the medical world and understanding disease,
Yeah,
one of the conditions I treat in our chromosomes,
yes,
all that's missing is one amino acid,
yes,
and the whole body has a disease
right,
called cystic fibrosis. And
Right.
in the old days, those children died.
right,
So if all of the amino acids aren't in the right space in our body, we would not have life.
right,
Right, and as they're learning more about genetics, they're finding way more genetic disees. So
Right.
things that they didn't have an explanation for before, they're finding it's a loss of information.
right,
So it
Right.
speaks to the beauty of the original body that God created for us that was perfect.
right. All right, so there's a lot there that Maureen just said. If you couldn't hear her, she's basically talking about how our bodies, using that verse, are fearfully and wonderfully made. That God, when something goes wrong in our bodies by a genetic defect, then you have problems. Okay, so she mentioned cystic fibrosis is one of them, right? So that speaks against the idea of chance just creating our bodies. And then the last point here, even if chance could produce molecules and atoms, could such a non-living principle produce the soul and spirit aspects of creation? Okay, so we know that there is a spiritual, unless you are a total materialist and say that your thoughts are only chemical reactions in your brain. Okay, some people argue that. Then the fact that you have a brain, the fact that you have a spirit, speaks to the impossibility of the option of chance. So if you look at the chart there, we're down to eternal God. Okay? And so we're going to say the only viable option, God created the universe. So point one, under cause and effect, do not apply to God. God is eternal. He is not an effect. He is the cause. So what we are saying is, what creation tells us, there is Aquinas' term was the unmoved mover. Okay? There is a force that causes everything. And the Bible tells us who that force is. But special revelation tells us there is a force. Okay? And that force has never had anything affect him. Or it, if you want to be generic here. Okay? It does not apply to God. God is eternal, not in effect the cause. All right? Secondly, the universe does not reveal the character or person of God. This is why we need special revelation, because we can see God's power, but we can't see God's person out of general revelation. Okay? And then the next point, the universe reveals the existence, power, intelligence, and life of God. So this force has great power. It created everything that is. This force has intelligence because everything is so intricately designed, and the more we know about how things work, the more intricate it becomes. And it has life, because you can't create life out of something that isn't alive. See? So this is the argument, the basic argument. Now, there's a few things on this last point. Living to produce life, powerful because of the nature of the immense thing formed, and then finally intelligent because of the order of the universe. So that just sums up what I just said. All right. Now, so we're saying this is, now I'm simplifying. Somewhere in here I noted all my points in this conversation involve an oversimplification. Like, there's way more in this argument that sometimes can get very, very tedious to read if you're reading a theology textbook. But this is the outline, simplified, of what we're saying. This is the cosmological argument, simplified. A couple of key passages of Scripture supporting this argument. So first of all, Psalm 19, verses 1 through 7. The heavens are telling of the glory of God, and their expanse is declaring the work of his hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Their line has gone out through all the earth, and their utterances to the end of the world. In them he has placed a tent for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. It rejoices as a strong man to run his course. Its rising is from one end of the heavens, its circuit to the other end of them. There is nothing hidden from its heat. So there he talks about the heavens speaking, and then he uses the example of the sun as being one of those things that speak to us of the immense power of God. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. We're not hearing them speak. But we can interpret from these things that there is something that has created all things. All right? That's the lesson. All right, so creation continually reveals God's glory, verses 1 to 2. This revelation is clearly seen, though it's nonverbal, verse 3. This revelation is universal, everywhere and to everybody. All right, so everyone feels the effect of the sun. Now, in the commentary or in the notes, he said almost everyone can see the effects of the sun. But he says even a blind person can feel the sun's heat or the lack of heat. So everyone feels the effect of the sun. This ought to raise the questions. How did the sun get here? How did its regular beneficial effects come about? You know, the whole idea, well, we say it's rising. Actually, the earth is turning, as you know. Okay? We're not flat earthers. Okay, so the sun, the earth is turning so that the whole planet gets a regular dose of sunshine. That in itself is essential to creating life. We don't want it too hot. Like if the earth were not rotating the way it is, then it would get too hot and nothing could live. But because it rotates, it doesn't get too hot, and the energy from the sun feeds the plants feed the animals, and we eat the steaks. Okay? So as people, the joke is that I am a vegetarian, okay? I eat processed plant food, processed grass, grass-fed beef, whatever. Okay, so that's a joke. I'm not dissing anybody's viewpoint here. Okay, so but this is what the sun does. So how did it get there? And this regular circle, and even in the, I think in the scientific community, certainly at least in the creation science, they talk about the earth being in the Goldilocks zone, where it's just right. There's just enough heat from the sun, there's just enough light, there's all of the things. Just enough tilt. There's all kinds of things about the way the earth is made and the way this all works that is just right. Goldilocks, finding the little baby bear's bed, right? Oh, it's just right. Okay? So the earth is just right. How did that happen? Okay? Well, God. Okay, and this is what Psalm 19 is saying. Second key passage is Romans chapter 1, verses 18 to 23. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power, and his divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations. Their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man, and of birds and four-footed animals and crawling creatures. So a few points from this. Number one, wrath is revealed. Notice verse 18, the wrath of God is revealed against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of man. Okay, and the details are going to come in the part I'll quote in just a moment. Wrath is explained in verses 19 to 23. First of all, something can be known of God. Man rejects and perverts what is clearly seen of God in the universe. Instead of submission, there is rebellion, and instead of worship, idolatry. And man is in charge of what he says created the world. And so when you get into the realms of the ancients, you are thinking in the time when Paul was writing this, the Romans had all kinds of gods that they believed in. Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, and then they had household gods. Each family had their own special gods. And then there were the mystery religions. And so all of these attempts at explaining the universal revelation of God were the result of man rejecting and perverting what they could clearly see from God, that there is a great power there that we need to respect. And they turned it into images of man and birds and creatures, and four-footed creatures and crawling creatures. All of these things became images to them of God, of the God that created the world. So this even when we look at this wide diversity of confused religion, it speaks to the fact that there is a God who created everything, even though they've corrupted the truth about God. Okay. I've read some of the and had explained to me some of the First Nations people in our area have talked to me about legends that is told in their oral history about how the world came about. Well, it's a complete distortion, but the fact that they have that idea speaks that there is an eternal God who created what we see. You see, so that's the cosmological argument. Let's just finish our passage here. Okay, so I'm not going to read this whole thing. It's lengthy. I will read, therefore God gave them over to the lust of their hearts to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. And then he goes on and expands on that. So the wrath is detailed in this section. So the downward spiral into sinfulness is itself a manifestation of the wrath of God. So the wrath of God is revealed in them. Therefore, God gave them over to the lust of their flesh. Verse 26, for this reason God gave them over to degrading passions. Verse 28, God gave them over to a depraved mind. Okay, so there's this seeming spiritual descent as people have turned away and rejected what they can know about God. So then God judged them for that very purpose. And then finally, the ultimate end of man's rejection of God is judgment to come. It says at the end, these are worthy of death. Okay, they're worthy of death. All right, so I've rushed through. I'm going to give you one last thing, and then I'll give you a few minutes for comments. This is Ryrie. Man is justly condemned because he does not receive what God does tell him about himself through creation. Okay, so people will often say, well, what about those who have never heard? They have never heard, really, that there is a true God. That's what the Bible is saying. Okay, now, what they have heard is the voice of natural revelation. There we combine the terms. General revelation, natural theology, natural revelation. That's what they've heard. All right, Maureen.
Well, could you not say that they also, though, would have heard from their ancestors of the true God that was turned away from?
That's right. If you go back far enough in those legends, somewhere, someone rejected the God that they knew about. And we can go back to the Tower of Babel, I think, perhaps for the for the beginning of this, or a major beginning point in this history. So people were scattered all over the earth. And the evidence is, according to, I mean, again, this is just, not that nobody knows this for certain, but for example, we talk about the First Nations here, and the people that were before them on this continent, the theory, as I understand it, is that there was at some point some kind of land bridge between Asia and North America. And the peoples that came over here, they were a result of that scattering of the Tower of Babel. Okay, and there are certain things in the scriptures that sort of indicate that there was a vast change after the Tower of Babel in which the earth itself changed. And so people were scattered all over. But way back, why did they turn away and why did they leave off, or why were they judged by God? Well, right in the Tower of Babel itself, they were trying to rebel against God. They had the revelation. In fact, they were only a few generations from Noah. Maybe I'm misstating that. They were not that long from Noah. I can't remember when Noah died and then the Tower of Babel happened. But they were not that far from Noah, and they rejected what Noah told them about God. And they made up their own gods. Okay? And so that is the result of, and the corruption of mankind throughout all those ages. Okay? All right, Tola.
Yes, I think there was a place in the Bible that said, before we were born, the law of God is written in our hearts.
That's right.
Those people that refuse to know God, they did it deliberately.
Yes.
Because they don't want to know God.
That's right.
If the Bible said that the law of God has been written in our hearts
Yes.
before we were born, it means they just decided on their own volition not to know God.
That's right. So she's talking about the law of God being written on hearts. I believe that's Romans chapter 2. But that is the argument from conscience. We'll be talking about that. That's part of general revelation. We'll be talking about that in a subsequent lesson. I don't know if it's, it won't be next week, but then 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now, we'll be coming back to this. But right now, what we've been talking about, this whole thing we talked about today, here's another big word for you today. You're getting all kinds of prizes, good words to use, the cosmological argument. People say, what did you go to church for? Well, let me tell you, I learned about antediluvians and the cosmological argument. Isn't that thrilling? People will be so impressed. Okay? I'm not sure. I'm not actually recommending this. I'm joking. Okay? So tell them that you learned it to love God more. That's the main thing. Okay. Any last questions or comments? We're a little bit over. Okay, well, let's pray. Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for helping us work through this study. It's very complicated. We're just getting the bare outline. Lord, I pray that you would help us as we work through this information to glorify you more and more because of what we find in God's Word. We can know for sure that we know you because of God's Word. We pray that you will work in our hearts as we study these things in Jesus' name. Amen.